Have you ever watched your own parents try to publicly strip you of something that was legally yours, while an entire wedding ballroom applauded them for it? No? Then imagine this. You're standing in the middle of your sister's wedding reception. 200 guests surround you, tech executives, venture capitalists, startup founders, the polished elite of San Francisco's Bay Area. Your mother hands you a folder. Inside are legal documents. And she tells you, smiling sweetly into a microphone, that you're about to give your $3 million penthouse to your sister as her wedding present. You tell her no. The smile disappears. Then your father steps forward and says quietly, "Don't embarrass the family, Olivia. Just sign." You refuse again. That's when my mother slapped me so hard my diamond earring skidded across the marble floor of the Palace Hotel ballroom. 200 people watched it happen. No one moved. They expected me to cry. They expected me to apologize. They expected me to fold the way I always had before. Instead, I bent down, picked up my earring, walked out of that ballroom, and made one phone call. 1 hour later, the woman my parents had spent 3 years telling everyone was confused, unstable, and too old to understand her own decisions walked into that wedding reception with a lawyer and proof that would destroy everything my mother had built. But before I tell you how that happened, make sure you subscribe to Women Reddit Stories if you enjoy stories about family drama, justice, and the moments when the truth finally comes out. Now let me take you back to where this all started. 3 years earlier. February 2021. I was sitting on the floor of my tiny apartment in Oakland, surrounded by open laptop screens and half-finished architectural renderings, when my phone lit up with a name that always made me smile. Grandma Elena. Elena Alvarez, to the rest of the world. Retired federal judge. 32 years on the bench in California. A woman who once sent a Silicon Valley billionaire to prison and then calmly ate lunch like it was just another Tuesday. To me, she was just Grandma. The woman who taught me how to bake almond cake and always slipped me $20 bills when my parents weren't looking. "Olivia," she said when I answered. Her voice was steady. Precise. The same voice that had once commanded silent courtrooms. "I need you to listen carefully." That was the moment I knew something serious was coming. My grandmother didn't waste words. She told me she had updated her will. Then she told me she was leaving me her penthouse in San Francisco. The one overlooking the Embarcadero. Purchased in 2016 for $2.4 million. Currently valued at just over $3 million. I remember staring at my laptop screen, blinking like my brain had temporarily stopped processing language. "Grandma," I said slowly. "Why me?" Not because I didn't want it. Because I genuinely didn't understand. She answered without hesitation. "Because you're the only one who still comes to see me." Silence stretched across the line. "For 12 years, Olivia," she continued softly. "You visited every Sunday when you were in college, and every other weekend after you graduated. You bring me coffee from that little place near my building because you remember the exact way I like it. You sit and listen to my stories even when they're not interesting." My throat tightened. "Your parents send flowers on holidays," she said. "Your sister sends nothing at all." I wiped at my eyes with the sleeve of my sweatshirt. "Grandma. The paperwork will be finalized next month," she continued. "My attorney, Daniel Carter, is preparing everything." Then she paused. And her voice softened just a little. "Your mother will not be happy." That turned out to be the understatement of the decade. The news reached my family within 2 weeks. To this day, I still don't know exactly how. Maybe someone at Daniel Carter's office mentioned it to someone who knew someone. San Francisco's legal and tech communities overlap more than people realize. All I know is that by early March my parents had arranged what they called a family conversation at their house in Pacific Heights. I remember walking into that living room and immediately feeling like I had stepped into a courtroom. My father, Daniel Alvarez, sat in his leather armchair near the fireplace. My mother, Veronica, was perched on the edge of the sofa. My younger sister Isabella leaned casually against the bar counter like she was posing for a lifestyle magazine shoot. They were waiting. For me. Olivia, my mother said. Her voice was sweet. Too sweet. We need to talk about your grandmother's condition. I stopped halfway across the room. Her condition? Yes, Veronica said calmly, crossing her legs. She's clearly not thinking rationally. My stomach tightened. She seems perfectly fine to me, I said. Isabella let out a dramatic sigh. This whole thing is just so awkward, she muttered. My father leaned forward. His tone was measured, the same tone he used in investor meetings. Olivia, leaving a multi-million-dollar property to one grandchild while excluding the rest of the family isn't the decision of a mentally sound woman. I stared at him. She isn't excluding anyone, I said slowly. She's giving me something she wants me to have. Isabella laughed under her breath. Of course she is, she said. You've been manipulating her for years. The words hit harder than I expected. I visit her, I said quietly. That's not manipulation. It's emotional leverage, my mother replied. My father folded his hands. The reasonable solution, he said calmly, would be for you to decline the inheritance. I blinked. Or, he continued smoothly, sell the penthouse and split the proceeds evenly between family members. I looked at each of them. My parents. My sister. 3 people who had barely spoken to my grandmother in years. 3 people suddenly became very interested in her property. I'm not declining anything, I said. And I'm not selling anything. The temperature in the room dropped instantly. Veronica's smile vanished. Then I hope you're prepared, she said coldly. For the consequences of being this selfish. At the time, I thought she meant arguments. Maybe a few cold holidays. Maybe some passive-aggressive comments at family dinners. I had no idea those consequences would eventually lead to my own mother slapping me across the face in front of 200 wedding guests. And that was only the beginning. The consequences began quietly. At first, it was small things. The family group chat stopped including me. Messages about birthdays, dinners, and holidays simply stopped arriving. I didn't notice right away. I was busy working long hours at a small architecture firm in Oakland, trying to build a portfolio strong enough to eventually start my own practice. But then one afternoon in June 2021, I opened Instagram during my lunch break and saw a photo that made my stomach drop. My sister Isabella stood in the center of a rooftop party overlooking the Golden Gate Bridge. A diamond ring sparkled on her finger. Around her were cousins, aunts, family friends, and my parents raising champagne glasses. The caption read, "She said yes, future Mrs. Carter." No one had told me. No one had invited me. I stared at the photo for a long time before closing the app. That night I called my mother. "Oh," Veronica said breezily when I asked about the engagement party. "We assumed you were busy." "With what?" "With your little architecture hobby." My little architecture hobby was a licensed position at a respected firm with 6 active projects and a supervisor who had recently hinted at a promotion. But to Veronica Alvarez, anything that didn't involve venture capital, social status, or a marriage that merged wealthy families was a hobby. The worst part wasn't the exclusion. It was the stories she started telling. The first time I heard one was by accident. In September I attended a gallery opening in Soma with a coworker. Halfway through the event I heard my mother's voice across the room. She didn't see me. She practically lives at Elena's apartment, Veronica was saying to a small group of guests. You know how vulnerable elderly people can be. Someone murmured something I couldn't hear. Yes, exactly, my mother continued. She's been influencing her for years. Turning her against the rest of the family. My chest tightened. I stood there frozen while strangers nodded sympathetically. She convinced my mother to rewrite her will, Veronica said sadly. Imagine doing that to your own grandmother. I walked out before anyone noticed me. For the next year, that story spread. According to my mother, I had manipulated a confused old woman into handing over a multi-million-dollar property. She said I visited my grandmother constantly to isolate her. She said I'd always been jealous of my sister. She said the penthouse situation had brought out my true character. And through all of it, I stayed silent. I told myself arguing publicly would only make things worse. If I kept my head down and focused on work, eventually the rumors would fade. But silence, I would later realize, was exactly what my mother had been counting on. Around that same time, my grandmother moved into a luxury senior residence in Marin County called Silver Grove Estates. The facility overlooked rolling green hills and the distant shimmer of the bay. It cost nearly $14,000 a month. When I asked her why she moved, she simply said she wanted peace. She said she was tired of the tension between my parents and me. But sometimes when I visited her on Sundays, I noticed something strange. A tension behind her eyes. Like she was constantly calculating something. Waiting. One afternoon in early 2022, we were sitting on the balcony outside her apartment, drinking tea. "Grandma," I said carefully, "did something happen between you and Mom?" She watched a hawk circle over the hills for a long moment. Then she said quietly, "Some things are better left alone. At least for now." I nodded, even though the answer didn't satisfy me. I trusted her. If she said it wasn't time to talk about it yet, I accepted that. Looking back, that was my second mistake. The first had been believing my mother's hostility would eventually burn itself out. 2 years passed. 2 years of quiet distance from my family. 2 years of building my career, visiting my grandmother, and trying to pretend the situation didn't exist. Then, in December 2023, everything changed. I was sitting in my office late one Friday afternoon reviewing structural drawings for a boutique hotel renovation when the mailroom assistant dropped a small stack of envelopes on my desk. Most were bills. One was a holiday card. And one was an envelope made of thick cream-colored cardstock with my name written in elaborate calligraphy. My stomach tightened before I even opened it. Inside was a wedding invitation. Isabella Alvarez and Lucas Carter. March 15, 2024. The Palace Hotel. San Francisco. Black tie. For a full minute, I just stared at it. After 2 years of being treated like I didn't exist, my sister suddenly wanted me at her wedding. That evening my phone rang. "Olivia, darling." My mother's voice sounded warm. Too warm. "Did you receive Isabella's invitation?" "I did." "Wonderful," Veronica said brightly. "This wedding will be such a beautiful opportunity for our family to heal." Heal. I said nothing. "To move forward," she continued. "To show everyone that the Alvarezes are united." There was a pause. Then her tone shifted slightly. "I've also been thinking about the penthouse." Of course she had. "Isabella and Lucas will need somewhere to live after the honeymoon," my mother continued. "Somewhere appropriate for a young couple beginning their life together." I closed my eyes. The invitation hadn't been reconciled. It had been bait. "Mom," I said quietly, "the penthouse belongs to me." "That doesn't have to change," she replied smoothly. "You could simply transfer the property to Isabella as a wedding gift." I actually laughed. The audacity was breathtaking. "Think how generous that would look," Veronica continued. "Think how proud your grandmother would be." Using my grandmother, the woman who had chosen me specifically, as an argument for giving the apartment away. "I'm not transferring anything," I said. The warmth in her voice vanished instantly. "Isabella deserves a proper start," she said coldly. "She's marrying into a very prominent family. So Lucas's family can buy them a house." Silence filled the line. Then my mother said something that sent a chill down my spine. I expect you to think carefully about this before the wedding. And I expect you to make the right decision. She hung up. I sat alone in my office as the winter sun sank behind the buildings of downtown Oakland. For the first time, I realized exactly what my mother was planning. If I attended the wedding and refused her demand in front of San Francisco's wealthiest families, she would make sure I paid for it socially and professionally. But if I didn't attend, it would look like guilt. Like I had something to hide. For 3 days I considered declining the invitation. Then something inside me hardened. I had done nothing wrong. I wasn't going to hide like I had. So I sent back the RSVP. Yes. 1 week before the wedding, my phone rang at 7 in the morning. It was my grandmother. "Olivia," she said, her voice unusually serious. "I need you to listen very carefully. I need you to listen very carefully." My grandmother almost never sounded nervous. That alone made me sit up straight in bed. "I'm listening," I said. "If something happens at that wedding," she continued slowly, "and I believe something will, I want you to call Daniel Carter immediately. Her attorney. The number is 415-555-7824. Write it down." I grabbed the notepad beside my bed. "Grandma, what do you mean something will happen?" "Your mother thinks I don't know what she's planning," Elena said calmly. "She forgets I spent 3 decades reading people who were lying under oath." There was steel in her voice now. "I've prepared everything, Olivia. Daniel has all the documents." "Documents?" I asked. "What documents?" "Just remember the number," she said. Then she paused. And when she spoke again, her voice softened. "I love you." The sudden tenderness caught me off guard. "I love you too," I said. The line clicked. She had already hung up. I sat there on the edge of my bed for several minutes, staring at the phone. My hands were shaking. I didn't know why. But a quiet instinct told me something enormous had been building beneath the surface of my family for years. And whatever it was, my grandmother had been waiting for the right moment to reveal it. That moment, apparently, would be my sister's wedding. March 15th arrived cold and bright. The Palace Hotel stood in the heart of San Francisco like a monument to old luxury. Crystal chandeliers. Marble floors. Vaulted ceilings painted with gold leaf. I had passed the building hundreds of times, but walking through the doors that afternoon felt different. Like entering hostile territory. The ballroom was breathtaking. White orchids hung from tall silver stands. A string quartet played softly in the corner. Waiters circulated with trays of champagne and tiny appetizers that looked like works of art. Every detail screamed money. And every detail had Veronica Alvarez written all over it. During cocktail hour I counted the chairs. 192 guests. Startup founders. Investment partners. Real estate developers. Political donors. My mother had invited everyone who mattered in her world. This wasn't just a wedding. It was a stage. I wore a simple black evening dress. Elegant. Understated. I had spent hours deciding what to wear. Anything too expensive would make people whisper about the penthouse. Anything too simple would embarrass the family. So I chose something neutral. Something that felt like me. My father found me first. "Olivia." He nodded politely as if we were acquaintances meeting at a conference. "Dad." We stood there for several seconds. Neither of us had anything real to say. After 32 years of being his daughter, I had become someone he avoided eye contact with. "I'm glad you came," he finally said. His voice sounded careful. Like someone walking across thin ice. Before I could answer, Isabella appeared. She looked like something out of a bridal magazine. White silk gown. Diamond earrings. Her hair swept into an elaborate twist. She hugged me lightly. The kind of hug you give a coworker you barely know. Olivia, she said brightly. You made it. Of course, I said. You're my sister. She stepped back and studied me. Then she asked quietly. Did you bring the paperwork? My stomach dropped. What paperwork? Her smile faltered. The transfer documents. For the penthouse. The world seemed to pause for a moment. Mom said you'd bring them today, Isabella continued lightly. You know, as our wedding gift. I stared at her. You're serious. Of course I'm serious, she said. We already told Lucas's parents we'd be moving in after the honeymoon. You told them about an apartment that isn't yours. Her smile tightened. You don't even need it, she said. You still live in that tiny place in Oakland. You don't entertain. You don't host events. What's the point of you having a $3 million penthouse? The words hit like tiny darts. Not painful individually. But together they carried years of quiet contempt. I answered calmly. The point is that Grandma wanted me to have it. Isabella leaned closer. Her perfume was sharp and expensive. Mom will handle this, she whispered. And when she does. Her voice dropped even lower. Don't say I didn't warn you. She walked away toward her bridesmaids. I stood alone beside the champagne bar, my heart beating too fast. Across the room I noticed clusters of guests glancing in my direction. Some whispering. Some smiling politely. My mother had clearly been telling her version of the story for years. To them, I wasn't the rightful owner of anything. I was the greedy granddaughter clinging to property that should belong to the family. A woman in a cream-colored suit approached me. I recognized her immediately. Margaret Leland. A venture capitalist who often attended my mother's charity galas. You're Olivia, right? She said pleasantly. Yes. I've heard so much about you. Something in her tone made my stomach tighten. I understand you're holding on to your grandmother's apartment, she continued. That must be quite a responsibility. There it was. The narrative my mother had built. I wasn't the heir. I was the caretaker. The temporary holder of family assets. I live there, I said quietly. Her eyebrows lifted. Oh. Well. She smiled politely and drifted away. I suddenly felt like the entire room was watching me through invisible lenses. Evaluating. Judging. Waiting. I slipped out onto the balcony. The cool evening air hit my face and I breathed deeply. From there I could see Market Street glowing under rows of city lights. San Francisco looked calm from above. Peaceful. My phone buzzed. Grandma Elena. I answered immediately. Hi. Tell me what's happening, she said. Her voice was calm. Too calm. How do you know something's happening? Because I know my daughter. A pause. She's been preparing for tonight for weeks. How? She's been making phone calls, Elena said. Building her case. Gathering witnesses. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. She needs an audience, my grandmother continued. Your mother always needs an audience. What exactly is she planning? I don't know, Elena said honestly. But I know it will happen tonight. I looked through the ballroom doors at the glittering crowd. The stage. The microphones. The perfectly arranged tables. Olivia, my grandmother said softly. Do you remember the number I gave you? Yes. If anything happens, call Daniel immediately. I will. There was a pause. Then she said something that made my chest tighten. I've been waiting 3 years for this. For what? For the truth, she said. Then the line went silent. I stood there on the balcony for a long moment. The city lights flickered below. Inside the ballroom the string quartet shifted into a brighter melody. Somewhere inside that room, my mother was preparing something. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't the only one ready. Dinner began at exactly 7 p.m. My mother had always been obsessed with schedules, timelines, perfect execution. The ballroom lights dimmed slightly as waiters carried out the first course, seared salmon over saffron risotto served on wide porcelain plates with gold rims. I sat at table 16 near the back of the room. The seating chart was deliberate. My cousins sat at tables closer to the stage. Lucas's family occupied the center tables. Tech founders and investors filled the front rows. And me? I had been placed beside distant acquaintances and two women from one of my mother's charity committees who barely spoke to me except for stiff, polite nods. Which suited me just fine. I wanted to disappear into the background. But my mother had never been very good at letting people escape her stage. After the dessert plates were cleared and the string quartet finished a soft rendition of At Last, the clinking sound of a spoon against crystal echoed through the ballroom. I felt it immediately. That small ripple of attention that moves across a room when someone important is about to speak. My mother stood at the head table. She held a champagne flute in one hand, a microphone in the other. Her silver evening gown shimmered beneath the chandelier light. She looked radiant, controlled, victorious. If I could have everyone's attention for just a moment, Veronica said warmly. The room fell quiet. I'd like to share something very special tonight. Her voice carried easily across the ballroom. Something that represents the true spirit of family. A quiet warning sensation crept up my spine. This evening isn't just about celebrating Isabella and Lucas, she continued. It's about the bonds that hold our family together. Her gaze drifted slowly across the room. Then it landed directly on me. And in that spirit, she smiled. I'd like to invite my eldest daughter, Olivia, to join me up here. Every head in the ballroom turned. Nearly 200 eyes. All focused on my table. My heart thudded in my chest. I didn't move. Olivia, sweetheart, my mother said gently into the microphone. Come up here, darling. My father glanced at me from across the room. His expression was tight. Almost pleading. Don't make a scene. That was the message. I stood. My legs felt strangely numb as I walked between the tables. I heard whispers. Curious murmurs. Someone even clapped softly, assuming something sentimental was about to happen. I climbed the small set of steps onto the stage. My mother wrapped one arm around my shoulders. From the outside it looked affectionate. Up close, her fingers dug into my upper arm hard enough to hurt. There she is, Veronica said brightly. Our Olivia. Polite laughter rippled through the crowd. As many of you know, she continued, our beloved mother, Elena Alvarez, left Olivia a truly remarkable inheritance. Murmurs moved through the room. A beautiful penthouse overlooking the Embarcadero, my mother said. Currently valued at just over $3 million. People nodded appreciatively. That was the language this room understood. Property value. Investment. Prestige. Olivia has been taking care of that property for the past 3 years, Veronica said. Waiting for the right moment to share it with the family. A folder appeared in her hand. I hadn't even noticed when she picked it up. And what better moment than tonight? She opened the folder. Inside were several sheets of legal documents. Even from where I stood I could see the bold heading across the top. Property transfer agreement. My stomach dropped. All Olivia needs to do, my mother continued smoothly, is sign these papers. She held the documents up for the audience. And Isabella and Lucas will begin their marriage in a home worthy of their future. The room erupted into applause. Actual applause. People smiled. Some even stood. They thought this was a touching moment. A generous sister giving an incredible gift. I stared at the documents. Then I looked at my mother. "Mom," I said quietly, "I'm not signing that." Her smile didn't change. "Don't be nervous, sweetheart," she said into the microphone. "It's just paperwork." "It's not just paperwork." The room had grown noticeably quieter. "It's my home," I said. "Grandma left it to me. Not to Isabella. Not to the family. To me." The applause faded. A strange silence settled over the ballroom. My mother's fingers tightened around my arm. "Let's not make this difficult," she whispered. The microphone picked it up anyway. "I'm not making it anything," I said. "I'm telling you no." Gasps scattered through the crowd. Isabella appeared beside the stage, her veil trailing behind her. Tears already shimmered in her eyes. "Olivia," she said softly, "you're really going to do this tonight?" I felt 200 pairs of eyes drilling into me. "You brought me up here without asking," I said. "You set this up." "We set it up because we knew you'd be selfish," Isabella snapped. Her voice was louder now. "You'd choose a stupid apartment over your own family." The words hung in the air. Sharp. Ugly. "The apartment wasn't stupid when you planned to live in it," I replied. Lucas's parents shifted uncomfortably at their table. The room was no longer smiling. My mother's composure cracked. Her face hardened. "You ungrateful child," Veronica hissed. The microphone amplified every word. "After everything we've done for you." "You didn't do anything for me," I said. "You've never even been to my apartment." Gasps rippled through the crowd. "And you didn't raise me," I continued. "Grandma did every summer while you were at conferences and galas." A wave of shocked whispers spread through the room. I knew I should stop. But years of silence had finally broken open. "The penthouse is mine because Grandma wanted me to have it," I said. "And no amount of public humiliation is going to change that." My mother moved so fast I didn't see it coming. Her hand cracked across my cheek. The sound echoed sharply through the ballroom. My head snapped sideways. Pain exploded across my face. My diamond earring flew off and skittered across the marble floor with a tiny metallic sound. The room went completely silent. Not a single voice. Not a single movement. For a moment, I just stood there. My cheek burned. My ears rang. Then I bent down slowly. I picked up the earring. It was slightly bent. But not broken. I straightened it carefully. Clipped it back into my ear. Then I looked at my mother. "That's the last time you touch me," I said calmly. My voice didn't shake. I turned. Walked off the stage. Walked past the tables. Past the stunned faces. Past the silent string quartet. And out the ballroom doors into the quiet hotel lobby. I didn't run. I didn't cry. I walked to a velvet bench near the concierge desk. Sat down. Pulled out my phone. And dialed the number my grandmother had given me. It rang once. Then a man answered. "Daniel Carter's office." "This is Olivia Alvarez," I said. My voice was steady now. "Please tell my grandmother." I paused. "The documents are needed." "Understood, Ms. Alvarez." Daniel Carter's voice was calm. Professional. "I'll notify her immediately." The call ended. I sat back against the velvet bench in the Palace Hotel lobby and touched my cheek gently. It was already swelling. Across the marble floor a few guests from the wedding drifted past the lobby entrance, whispering to each other in low voices. The news was spreading through the ballroom like wildfire. But none of that mattered now. My grandmother had said she needed 1 hour. So I waited. The large grandfather clock near the concierge desk ticked steadily. Minutes passed. The lobby slowly filled with quiet tension. Some guests from the reception wandered through, pretending to check their phones while glancing at me with open curiosity. Others avoided eye contact completely. Everyone knew something had gone very wrong upstairs. At 8:46 p.m., the main doors of the hotel opened, and my grandmother walked in. Elena Alvarez was 79 years old. She moved more slowly now, leaning lightly on a polished wooden cane. But everything else about her radiated the same commanding presence that had once filled federal courtrooms. Her silver hair was pulled back neatly. She wore a charcoal coat over a simple black dress. And beside her walked Daniel Carter. Mid-40s. Tall. Sharp suit. Carrying a leather briefcase that looked heavy enough to contain someone's entire future. When my grandmother saw me, her eyes immediately went to my cheek. She crossed the lobby quickly. Olivia. I stood. For a second my composure slipped. You came. Her hands gently cupped my face. Her eyes narrowed. She hit you. Yes. Her jaw tightened. The expression lasted only a second. Then she kissed my forehead softly, just like she had when I was a child. Well, she said calmly. Then it's time to finish this. Daniel Carter gave me a brief nod. Ready? I nodded back. We walked toward the ballroom doors together. Inside, the reception had dissolved into chaotic clusters of conversation. Guests stood in groups whispering. Champagne glasses sat forgotten on tables. The band had stopped playing. Isabella sat near the stage with mascara streaking down her face while Lucas and his parents hovered nearby looking deeply uncomfortable. My father stood stiffly beside the head table. And my mother. My mother was pacing furiously near the center of the room. She was speaking rapidly to a group of guests when someone noticed us. A gasp cut through the room. Then another. Heads began turning. One by one. Until nearly every face in the ballroom was staring toward the entrance. Toward my grandmother. Victoria Alvarez turned. The moment she saw her mother walking across the marble floor, the color drained from her face. Mom? The word came out strangled. What are you? How did you? I'm here for my granddaughter's wedding, Elena said calmly. Her voice carried effortlessly through the room. I wasn't invited, of course. A few uncomfortable chuckles rippled through the guests. But I decided to come anyway. She stopped 10 feet from my mother. I hope Isabella doesn't mind. Isabella didn't answer. She was staring like someone watching a ghost. What is this? My mother demanded. What are you doing here? My grandmother straightened slightly. I'm doing something I should have done 3 years ago. She turned slowly to face the entire ballroom. My name is Elena Alvarez, she said. I served as a federal judge for 32 years. I am of sound mind. And I am here to confirm that the Penthouse property at 601 Embarcadero Boulevard belongs legally and permanently to my granddaughter, Olivia Alvarez. A ripple moved through the room. Daniel Carter opened his briefcase. He withdrew a thick document. This, he said clearly, is a certified copy of Judge Alvarez's will, dated July 3, 2019. It has been filed with the San Francisco Probate Court and verified as legally binding. He held it up. There are no competing claims to that property. My mother's lips parted. This is ridiculous, she snapped. Mom, you're confused. I'm not confused, Elena said sharply. Her voice cut through the room like glass. What I am, is patient. Daniel pulled out a second document. These, he continued, are property transaction records from a home in Napa Valley. Several guests leaned forward slightly. The tension in the room thickened. That property belonged to Judge Alvarez until September 2020, Daniel said. When it was sold for $920,000. My grandmother's voice followed quietly. I never sold that property. A murmur spread across the ballroom. I couldn't have, she continued. I was recovering from hip surgery at Stanford Medical Center at the time. I signed nothing. Daniel lifted a third document. This is a forensic handwriting analysis conducted by Pacific Forensic Services. He turned slightly so the guests could see the report. The signature on the Napa Valley sale documents was compared to verified samples of Judge Alvarez's handwriting. He paused. The probability of forgery is 99.1%. The room exploded into shocked whispers. I saw Lucas's father stiffen. Across the room, two attorneys exchanged tense glances. You're lying, my mother shouted. This is fabricated. You're senile. My grandmother's eyes flashed. I'm sharp enough to hire experts, she said coldly. I'm sharp enough to preserve evidence. And I'm sharp enough to send this entire file to the San Francisco District Attorney's office last week. Silence dropped over the ballroom like a curtain. My mother stared at her. You didn't. Forgery and real estate fraud carry prison sentences in California, my grandmother said quietly. 5 to 8 years, depending on the charges. My father took a step backward. I didn't know, he said hoarsely. My mother spun toward him. You signed the paperwork. I signed what you told me to sign, he snapped. I didn't know it was forged. Gasps rippled across the room. 35 years of marriage cracked open right there under the chandeliers. Isabella's voice trembled. Mom, what is she talking about? My mother said nothing. She couldn't. Her perfect world was collapsing in front of the exact audience she had built it for. My grandmother turned to me. Her expression softened slightly. Olivia, she said. I'm sorry it had to happen this way. I squeezed her hand. It's okay. Then she looked at my mother one final time. You lost me the day I discovered what you did. Her voice was calm. But tonight, everyone else just learned the truth. She turned toward the exit. I walked beside her. Behind us, the ballroom erupted into chaos. My mother's voice rose in hysterical denials. Lucas's parents were speaking sharply to Isabella. Guests whispered loudly. Phones appeared. No one was pretending anymore. But I didn't look back. Not once. We reached the lobby doors together. And for the first time that night, I could breathe again. We made it halfway across the hotel lobby before someone called out behind us. Judge Alvarez. The voice was sharp. Controlled. I turned. Lucas Carter was striding toward us across the marble floor. His expensive tuxedo still looked perfect. His expression did not. Up close I could see the strain beneath his calm. The careful calculation of a man trying to salvage something valuable from a collapsing situation. He stopped a few feet away. Mrs. Alvarez, he said, addressing my grandmother directly. He didn't even glance at me. I think it would be best if we spoke privately. My grandmother studied him with the same expression she once used on attorneys trying to bluff their way through arguments in her courtroom. There's nothing private to discuss, she said. Lucas gave a tight smile. I think there may be misunderstandings about the Napa property. Families have disagreements. Documents get complicated. If we sat down with the lawyers, perhaps we could. The documents were forged, my grandmother interrupted calmly. My daughter committed fraud. Those are not misunderstandings. Lucas shifted slightly. For a moment the polished confidence cracked. Then he tried a different angle. The penthouse, he said. Isabella mentioned that you might reconsider the will given the circumstances. The marriage. The merging of our families. My grandmother raised an eyebrow. I'm not reconsidering anything. The penthouse belongs to Olivia. It will continue to belong to Olivia. Lucas's jaw tightened. And if you're asking whether I intend to leave my remaining assets to a granddaughter who just married a man negotiating inheritance in a hotel lobby. She tilted her head slightly. The answer is no. The words hung in the air. Lucas flushed deep red. For a moment I thought he might explode. Instead, he forced another tight smile. Surely we can come to some arrangement. You married the wrong Alvarez, my grandmother said gently. And frankly, after seeing your priorities tonight, Isabella is welcome to you. Daniel Carter stepped slightly forward then. His voice remained perfectly polite. I would advise returning to your wedding reception, Mr. Carter. Anything you say here could potentially be relevant to an ongoing investigation. Lucas Carter, son of one of the Bay Area's most influential real estate families, suddenly looked very young. Very nervous. He nodded stiffly. Then he turned and walked back toward the ballroom. My grandmother watched him go. Well, she murmured. That was enlightening. We stepped outside into the cool March air. San Francisco's evening fog was beginning to roll in from the bay. Streetlights reflected softly against the damp pavement. I pulled my coat tighter around my shoulders. Grandma, I said quietly. I'm sorry. She glanced at me. For what? For all of it. The wedding. The scene. The drama. She waved a hand dismissively. Oh please, she said. I've been waiting 3 years to say those things. A small smile appeared. It was quite satisfying. Despite everything, I laughed. The sound felt strange in my throat. Raw. But real. Daniel Carter joined us on the sidewalk. What happens now? I asked. The district attorney's office will review the evidence, he said. They already have the forensic reports and transaction records. Given the documentation Judge Alvarez preserved, it's very likely they'll proceed with formal charges. And my mother? Daniel chose his words carefully. That will depend on the investigation. My grandmother's expression softened slightly. Grief flickered there. But it was quiet grief. Controlled. I've done what I needed to do, she said. The rest belongs to the courts. I thought about my mother still inside that ballroom. Surrounded by the people she had spent decades impressing. Watching her reputation unravel piece by piece. A small part of me felt satisfaction. But a much larger part simply felt tired. I'm not doing this for revenge, I said quietly. My grandmother nodded. I know. You're doing it because some things cannot be allowed to continue. Some lies can't be permitted to stand. She squeezed my arm gently. There's no cruelty in telling the truth, Olivia. Only clarity. A black town car pulled up to the curb. Daniel had arranged it earlier. I should take Judge Alvarez back to Silver Grove, he said. It's been a long night. I'm not fragile, my grandmother replied dryly. But she climbed into the car anyway. Before the door closed, she pulled me into a hug. A real hug. Not the staged affection my mother had displayed earlier. I love you, she whispered. I love you too. Come see me tomorrow, she added. We have a lot to talk about. I will. The car door shut. The vehicle disappeared slowly into the foggy San Francisco streets. For several minutes I remained standing alone on the sidewalk outside the Palace Hotel. My phone buzzed in my hand. A text message. Daniel Ruiz. Daniel and I had been friends since college. Now he worked as an investigative reporter for the San Francisco Chronicle. His message read, just saw a legal reporter tweet about a major fraud allegation tied to a prominent Bay Area attorney. Please tell me that wasn't your mother. I stared at the screen. Then typed back. I'll explain later. And thank you. Another notification popped up immediately afterward. This one from a number I didn't recognize. Jennifer Park, Henderson and Tate Law Firm. Olivia, we briefly met at the wedding tonight. I want to apologize. I believe things your mother said about you that were clearly untrue. Watching how you handled yourself tonight was impressive. Our firm is renovating our offices this summer. If you're interested in discussing interior architecture work, please call me. I blinked. Jennifer Park. One of the women I had seen whispering with Margaret Leland earlier in the evening. Now offering me a professional project. I saved the number. Then I slipped my phone back into my pocket. Across the street, the Palace Hotel's massive windows glowed with warm golden light. Inside, the reception was probably dissolving into chaos. Phones ringing. Rumors spreading. Reputations collapsing. But none of that felt like my problem anymore. For the first time in 3 years, I felt something inside my chest loosen. Not triumph. Not revenge. Just relief. I turned toward the parking garage and began walking. Behind me, the Grand Hotel doors closed quietly. And with them, a chapter of my life finally ended. The fallout began almost immediately. 2 weeks after the wedding, my mother received an official request to appear at the San Francisco District Attorney's office for questioning regarding the Napa Valley property sale. According to Daniel Carter, the interview lasted nearly 4 hours. When she finally left the building, one of the investigators described her as looking 10 years older. Her attorney, a colleague she had known for nearly 2 decades, withdrew from representing her just 3 days later. Officially, he cited a conflict of interest. Unofficially, Daniel Carter suspected something else. Once he reviewed the forensic evidence, he probably realized the case was unwinnable. And in a legal community as tight-knit as San Francisco's, attaching your name to a losing fraud case wasn't exactly good for business. My father moved out of the Pacific Heights house shortly afterward. March 29. He checked into the Four Seasons Hotel downtown. The official explanation he released through a family friend was simple. Mr. Alvarez is taking time to process recent developments and had no prior knowledge of any improper financial transactions. Whether anyone believed that statement was another matter entirely. After all, his signature appeared on the same forged documents as my mother's. Claiming ignorance only works when people are willing to give you the benefit of the doubt. And after 35 years of standing quietly beside Veronica Alvarez while she dominated every room she entered, my father didn't have much benefit left. Isabella and Lucas postponed their honeymoon indefinitely. From what I heard through relatives, Lucas's parents had insisted on reviewing every financial detail before allowing the couple to travel internationally. Apparently, marrying into a family involved in an active fraud investigation wasn't exactly ideal for business relationships. The dream of moving into my penthouse had, of course, vanished overnight. The social consequences unfolded more quietly. But they were just as devastating. On April 4th, my mother received an email from Bay Area Justice Partners, the charity organization whose annual fundraising gala she had chaired for 16 years. The subject line read, "Your participation status has been updated." The email was polite, corporate, brief. Due to ongoing legal circumstances, the organization had decided to temporarily suspend her involvement in the upcoming gala pending further developments. In simpler terms, she had been disinvited. 2 days later, the California Bar Association opened an ethics inquiry after multiple attorneys who had attended the wedding submitted formal complaints. The complaints didn't accuse her of wrongdoing toward them directly. They simply alleged conduct unbecoming of a licensed attorney. In the legal profession, that phrase carried weight. A lot of weight. Then came the media. On April 12, a small article appeared in the San Francisco Chronicle's legal column. The headline read, "Prominent Bay Area attorney under investigation in suspected real estate fraud case." The article did not mention my mother by name. But in a city where professional circles overlapped constantly, anonymity lasted about 6 hours. Within 2 days, everyone knew. Over the next week, my phone buzzed with messages from people I hadn't heard from in years. Former classmates. Family acquaintances. Old neighbors. Some sent apologies. Some expressed sympathy. A few tried to fish for gossip. Those messages I ignored. But one email stood out. Jennifer Park from Henderson and Tate had followed up on her message from the wedding. The subject line read, "A proper apology." Her email began simply, "Olivia, I want to apologize for believing the things your mother said about you over the years. Watching the events at the wedding unfold made me realize how wrong those assumptions were. The dignity you showed under that kind of public pressure was remarkable. I don't expect forgiveness. But I would like to offer something concrete." She explained that her firm was renovating 2 conference rooms and a reception area. They were searching for an architect who could balance professionalism with creativity. The project budget was $95,000. I stared at the email for a long time. Part of me wanted to decline immediately. Anything connected to my mother's social circle still felt tainted. But another part of me recognized something important. Jennifer Park wasn't my mother. She had believed a lie. Now she was trying to correct it. 3 days later, I accepted the meeting. The project became the largest contract my small firm had ever secured. By early summer, 2 additional law firms contacted me about renovation work. Word was spreading. Not just about the scandal. About me. People who once dismissed me as the Alvarez daughter with the architecture hobby were suddenly interested in the woman who had stood her ground in a ballroom full of powerful people. I didn't trust all of them. I vetted every client carefully. Asked direct questions. Turned down one project from a man who seemed far more interested in discussing my mother's legal situation than my design work. But slowly, carefully, my business began to grow. The strangest development arrived in early June. Daniel Carter called me. "The Napa property sale is being reviewed in civil court," he said. "If the sale is officially ruled fraudulent, the property may revert to your grandmother's estate. It could take years," he added. "But the process has started." In other words, the wheels of justice were turning. 3 months after the wedding, I was sitting on the balcony of my penthouse watching the sun set over San Francisco Bay. The sky glowed orange and gold across the water. The city lights were beginning to flicker on. My grandmother sat across from me, sipping a glass of wine. We had begun spending every Sunday together again. Sometimes we visited museums. Sometimes we simply sat here and talked. Today, the conversation drifted toward my father. "He called yesterday," I said. My grandmother raised an eyebrow. "And?" "He says he didn't know about the Napa house. He says Mom handled all the paperwork and he just signed where she told him." She studied my face. "Do you believe him?" I thought about it. Really thought. "I believe he didn't ask questions," I said finally. "I believe he chose not to know." My grandmother nodded slowly. "And what did you tell him?" "I told him I need time. That if he wants a relationship with me, he'll have to earn it. Not through explanations. Through actions." "That's a healthy boundary," she said softly. We sat quietly for a moment. Then I added, "Isabella texted me last week." "And?" "She asked if we could talk." My grandmother waited. "I'm not ready," I admitted. She knew what Mom was doing. Maybe not the fraud. But the pressure. The lies. She watched it happen. And she said nothing. "That's true," my grandmother said gently. I stared out at the harbor. "I'm not closing the door forever. But I'm not opening it until she's ready to face the truth." My grandmother smiled. "You've learned something important." "What?" "That love without respect isn't love. It's habit." She reached over and squeezed my hand. "You deserve both." A cool breeze drifted across the balcony. For the first time in years, my life felt steady. Peaceful. A home that truly belonged to me. A career that was growing. Boundaries that were finally firm. And a future I was building one honest decision at a time. If you've ever been in a situation where family expected you to sacrifice your peace just to keep things comfortable, remember this. Setting boundaries doesn't make you selfish. It makes you free. And if this story resonated with you, make sure you subscribe to Women Reddit Stories for more stories about family, truth, and finding the strength to stand up for yourself. Thank you for listening. And remember, protecting your peace is never a crime.